Hi, this is a review of the analysis paper, which is the first major paper due in the course New Media Literacies for High Needs Schools, EDUC 506. This is an analysis paper. It says it's an analysis paper on youth and digital media. For those students that are working primarily with adults, just substitute the word in adult there for youth, and I'm looking for you to address your population. There's two purposes to this assignment. The first is to ask graduate students to write an academic paper, which is fairly standard in graduate level programs. And the second is for you to be able to discuss in more detail some aspects of the reading and to provide your own perspective on aspects of the reading. It's a 5 to 7 page paper. It should be in APA format. In addition to the 5 to 7 pages, you need to include a title page and a bibliography. And so, given that, let's take a look at what the requirements are from the paper. The paper is set up into 3 parts, an overview or an introduction. Part 2 is the literature review, discussing your readings, and Part 3 is your own perspective. Given that the paper is only supposed to be 5 to 7 pages, I would encourage that Part 1, the introduction, be fairly close to 1.5 pages. Certainly no less than 1 and no more than 2, because we're just introducing what the topic is. And so, to introduce the topic, what you're going to do is you're going to focus in on a particular aspect of the Jenkins reading that is also reflected in the other papers that you're going to be incorporating into your paper. So that could be participatory culture, it could be back-channeling, it could be the use of any of the new media literacy skills, it could be the use of simulation, the use of play, the use of collective intelligence. You can take any of those topics that appear in the Jenkins paper and tie it to how that topic is reflected in the other papers. It's important to know that we're looking at this fairly narrowly. 5 to 7 pages is not that much. So I'm really interested in you picking out and focusing on 1 or 2 core ideas. So you might think of distributed cognition and collective intelligence. You might think about participatory culture. There's a whole range of things that you can talk about. In Part 1, what you want to do is have a brief discussion of prevailing understandings of literacy, have a brief discussion of how those prevailing understandings affect practice, and also have a brief discussion of what value people seem to have regarding these new literacies and new practices. It should be organized very tightly, and you should have discussion points which outline how you're going to approach the discussion in the rest of the paper. In Part 2, what we're interested in you doing is then going into depth on what each of the articles that you're reviewing says. So, again, present the prevailing understandings in more depth, focusing again on the ideas or the concepts that you're going to be picking out from the papers. Go into more depth on practices, on how what we as adults or as teachers or as parents or as administrators, what our perspectives are, how that affects practice. And also take a look at how your population is using these media and how we can interact our practice with the way the youth are using their media or the adults are using their media, and how this is reflected in your papers. Your key discussion points should have been listed in the introductory part. In the second part, Part 2, then you should be discussing each of those key discussion points in more detail. In Part 3, This is where we're looking at you providing us with your opinion. So I want you to reflect on how these views of literacy and these changing views of literacy might impact you as a teacher and might impact your practice in particular. How is this different than perhaps the way you were taught? And do you have any agreements or disagreements in particular with Jenkins? Is your findings, is your experience, is your practices, do they have a fundamental disagreement with Jenkins? And what is that? Go, explain that a little bit. And then finally, I'm looking for a paragraph on, so how is this, what's your plan of action? Now that you've thought these issues of literacy through, and you've thought them through with particular practices, what's your plan of action for your future classroom? And that's the paper, that's the entire paper. So we're revisiting this concept of literacy again over and over. And in class last week, you can draw tremendously on what we talked about and on the activities that we engaged in last week, because all of those activities have a direct impact on this particular paper. So think about what we talked about in class, think about what you believe, think about what you're reading that Jenkins believes, take a look at what the other people believe who've written the other articles, and then you're going to be pulling this all together. Now, the writing elements aspect of this paper is very straightforward. It needs to be written as an academic paper, but be sure to look at number 3 here. Don't make it overly academic. I'm not looking for lots and lots of lingo. I'm looking for something clear. Think of your audience as another teacher, and not necessarily as a professor, at a large university. We've already talked about how important the efficiency and directness of your writing is. Please use first person or third person, and you can switch between the two in the paper if you want to. And you should organize your discussion around a main theme, which is probably the theme of the particular new media literacy skill or the particular aspect of participatory culture that you're going to be drawing on in this paper. 2 quick points in the end. The 2 things I tend to take off for most often on this paper are lack of appropriate APA format for citations and the overuse of quotes. Please keep in mind that quotes should never make your statement for you. They should support your statement, and they should be brief. They should not be long. In a 5 to 7 page paper, I shouldn't be seeing a paragraph long quote in it anywhere. Remember, quotes are evidence. They support your point. They are not the statement itself, and that's extremely important. Paraphrasing if you need to, and if appropriate, but don't bring in those direct quotes. And that's it. Please be sure to email me if you have any questions about this paper. In terms of the due dates, the paper for my Wednesday class, the draft is due on July 29th. And the paper is due, if you choose not to turn in a draft, the paper is going to be due on the August 1st. For my Friday class, the draft is due on August 3rd. And then I will grade those and send them back to you, and then you will have the option of rewriting them. If you have any questions, just email me. Thank you very much. Take care.